And it is time. We are finally arrived. The spotlight has been hit. You could see it. The signal is in the air. The bad guys in Gotham must get ready because Everitt O'Neill and myself, Mike Mercado, are here to talk about vengeance. That is right. The two nerds of a feather podcast are back to give you a full review of Matt Reeves, The Batman. And it has been a fun time talking about this movie off air, E-Train. And I know that the people, the fans of the Two Nerds of a Feather podcast have seen us on social media, have talked about us talking about it, but we are finally here able to give a full discussion and review. And I think this is going to be fun because it's not just going to be talking about the movie itself, but a lot of the themes and things that we saw out of it, the world building and the film that it was. So it's going to be a really interesting edition of the Two Nerds of a Feather podcast. Everitt O'Neill and myself, Mike Mercado, talking about the Batman. Everitt, Bodie, what did you think? We're going to get into spoilers in about 5 minutes. So if you're watching this as of this recording, get ready, get set, get your popcorn. If you've watched it, we're going to go full spoilers. But if you haven't, this is week 2 of the film. A bunch of people are going to get a chance to watch it, to get a chance, the whole family, the St. Patrick's Day weekend to watch it. So Everitt, your thoughts of the Batman non-spoilers.
Well, first of all, it's good to be back after a little hiatus. All right. Mike Mercado, Everett O, Two Nerds of a Feather is back. That's right. Back and better than ever. And
it's great. It's great timing. I mean, I like this movie. And, obviously, back when Alex was in trying to win national champions and get to the Olympics with his cheer team, shout out to the good brother, Alex Mercado. This would be something that we had been keeping an eye on because of how we got to this point. This was a movie that was supposed to be directed and starring Ben Affleck. And then Matt Reeves comes in. And then Ben Affleck leaves. And then we get Robert Pattinson. And next thing we know, this new incarnation of the Cape Crusader has hit the movie theaters. It is at 85% on Rotten Tomatoes with the critics and 89% with the audience. This is a movie that has both critically and financially hits. This is a movie that has a lot of things going for it, and we're going to break a lot of it down because of how I think monumental of a pop culture thing this was. Everybody's talking about it, from grandmothers to little kids, and then nerds like us and everybody in between. And that's because of, I think, the importance of Batman in our modern society, our pop culture. I've always said that he's the most important fictional character in modern day. And there's been some great ones. And I think he's, to me, though, how open you can be with a Batman character. And this film does that. So I guess for me, this was a fantastic film. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Your quick score?
I'm going to give it a 9.5.
All right. So I think this is a movie. Yeah, this is a top tier movie. We'll talk about our rankings in a little while at the end of the episode. But I think we could start this conversation with Batman's importance, because a lot of talk every single time there's a new Batman. This is one of the rare characters, just like James Bond. And that's at the level we're talking about when it comes to these characters in our society. When we're having these conversations, I know it's a luxury to have. There's a war going on, and there's crazy gas prices. But these are the stories that help societies get over, are able to, distract themselves for 3 hours in this case, able to understand and appreciate why we fight these things, right? Why freedoms and having these type of experiences are important. It's living life. And I think a character like Batman is something that is so important and sacred to a lot of people. And with this character and how important it is for the person to play this character, what is your initial thoughts of the IP, the legend, the story, the character of Batman?
For me, Batman was the first, and I don't want to say superhero because he doesn't have superpowers, but he's still a superhero to me, but he was the first superhero I'd ever known. Before I knew Spider-Man, Iron Man, Superman, Wonder Woman, the X-Men, any of that, I knew Batman. And so he resonated with me early on. Batman was like Bret Hart to me. Those were the people I laid eyes on, and those are the people who I've been riding for ever since. And so, Batman will always matter. And seeing all these different lists. And usually Batman is either like one or two in those like top 100 greatest superheroes list, because he's undeniable for just a billionaire playboy, with a lot of resources and gadgets. Like, he is, universal and, generational, going all the way back to, the campy na-na-na-na-na-na-nas, to the comics, to the movies, to the games. I mean, there's so many variants of Batman that, I've come to love and enjoy. And like, there isn't one yet that I have come to not appreciate, except for George Clooney. But that's neither here nor there yet.
Right. And my thing about Batman and Robin, which we'll get to, it shows why I think Batman is so universal, so inevitable, and also such a great birthing spot. It's such fertile ground for writers and for creative minds, because you could put Batman in the times of gas lamps. You could put him in the time of pirates. You could put him in the future. You could make him a contemporary. And it's something that is really interesting, that brings the best, I think, out of creators, because you could put a lot of everyday issues that are currently happening in your world onto him, and we'll get into it right now, what Matt Reeves was able to do to the story. And I think that's the most important thing, is to talk about this story. We are going to get into spoilers now. And the story of this movie, it's funny how it reflects modern society. And then you look at something like The Dark Knight Rises, how, as you look back into it, the difference of what Christopher Nolan was tackling compared to what Matt Reeves was trying to tackle. And it's, to me, as much as I love The Dark Knight Rises, especially the first two acts, what I think this movie does better is not just the realism of what the Riddler was able to gather a following, that he was able to get, empathy from people. They were able to tell you a story in which Batman isn't beating up poor people. This was a city that was dying, that was literally a cancer amongst itself, and it was just killing itself. And to see how Matt Reeves was able to tell that story of a city that was just 1 second away from completely just being anarchy. And you felt that the entire movie, even though you didn't have to see crazy riots or crazy CGI things, even when it was just Batman doing an investigation, being a detective, you felt the tension in the air that at any given moment something can pop. So I love this as a Batman story. I think the reason why I hold this Batman movie in such a high level is just on a core, whether it would have been a comic book, a video game, a cartoon, or as we got into a movie. This is a great Batman story. When you got out of the theater, you saw this 3-hour epic. Your thought on the story of the Batman?
For me, it felt like the most complete story that and I'd say it's a complete story, but I know we're also going to get more. But for it to just come right out of the gate, the way that it did, and to like tell a perfect story of, a young Batman in year 2, who isn't necessarily processing grief the right way, and is like pretty much disassociating from everything and everyone, even from, Bruce Wayne, and like, he's just hell bent on, revenge, because he is vengeance. And like, and so you're seeing this story of like someone who's also like conflicted within himself, besides like Gotham, in turmoil and imploding. Like, you're seeing, Battinson, also wrestling with himself. And just that story, along with, the dynamic between him and Alfred was very interesting as well, to like kind of see, for, most of the film, like up until like maybe the third act, just him being so cold, towards Alfred, and kind of giving him this reminder every time, like, you're not my dad, and like, you can tell how much that would hurt him every time, and it wasn't until that moment where he almost lost him, where he realized just, like, I've been holding in so much, besides like almost losing him and then finding out the truth of his own father, and kind of realizing how he needed to humanize himself. And like you said, there were so many elements of real life that played out in that film. And part of me wonders, like, you know, was Matt Reeves paying attention to like certain Twitter topics? Because, you know, people always want to drag Batman about how he beats up on criminals instead of like, you know, giving them the proper resources to get the help that they need. You know, like you had the one sister, what was the last name, Real or something like that?
Yeah. The would be new mayor at the end of this
The new
film.
mayor, and you know how she was kind of alluding to, like, you got all this money, but you're not doing anything with it. Like, you know, the city needs your help, and like him just having like no interest at all, and you know, kind of even hearing Selena kind of dunk on Bruce Wayne, the man, you know, being this privileged white man who has all of these funds and isn't doing anything to help the city, not even knowing like the man in front of you is doing what he thinks is helping the city. And like, it's just so many layers to peel back. And like, I just walked away so satisfied and, you know, so nourished and full from what I consumed, knowing that I'm going to get more and that we are going to see, you know, like some big character development, you know, within these next, hopefully, many films we're going to get, you know, in this franchise for however long Pattinson wants to do it, you know. And then we got like these spinoff shows and what I'm going to call the Reeves verse, you know. Like, there's just I'm so pleased, I'm so satisfied. I never thought I would get a Batman film like this in my lifetime, and I'm just so thankful at the tender age of 33 that I got to see a Batman story told the way that I had always wanted to see Batman. I wanted darkness, I wanted grit, I wanted like that detective feel. Okay, I don't want to feel good when I see Batman. I want to be terrified like these criminals were, where they're just lurking in the shadows, wondering if he's going to pop up. Like, I got all of that, and I got a tormented young man. Okay, I didn't walk out of that feeling good at all. Even at the end, I didn't feel good walking out of there, but I was still satisfied because I didn't feel good.
Yeah, it's almost like when you watch the end of Seven, or
Yeah,
when you watch a movie like that, the Usual Suspects, where it's like, oh, that was really good. You're like, I don't feel great about it. It's not Spider-Man Homecoming, but I think that's why those two movies this year, you know, or at least within the same holiday season at the end of the other year, like it was a great palette for each other. This is why I really appreciated the movie. It's 2 points, and you bring it up what you wanted to see from a Batman movie. I thought The Dark Knight was the pinnacle of what we were going to see of a realistic, a gritty Batman. I thought what Ben Affleck did, I like Ben Affleck as Batman. I like some of the things that Zack Snyder did with Batman. What I appreciated about those were almost the over exaggeratedness of it, the injustice type of Batman against a Superman, right? Like the Tim Burton and the Joel Schumacher kind of had some goth to them, but they also had the old school 1966 Batman feel to them. This was the first Batman film where it wasn't Bruce Wayne trying not to be Batman. This was Batman having no choice but to be Bruce Wayne because that's the only thing. It's a mode that he uses to get the job done. It's another tool in his belt. If he could, he would be Batman all day. And for me, I think Robert Pattinson I always had high hopes for him as Batman. I always loved the casting. He won me over right away in his voiceover. Because at that given moment, you understood that Matt Reeves knows what this character is, and you could feel it in his voice. I've seen it twice, and the second time I took my wife and my mother to go see it. And my mom was the one who pointed out, she's like, one of her favorite things from Pattinson was he spoke softly. He never really changed his voice. There wasn't a gimmick, and he always looked like he was observing something. And you can never take your eyes off of him.
yeah,
Of course, it's Batman on the screen, but you were always watching what was he doing? What was he looking at? They didn't need to use exposition. They didn't need somebody to sit there on the screen and be like, Batman's looking at that. They set up a shot. They set up a scenario, and you saw him be a detective. And you saw Batman being Batman. And again, this is why, to me, there's so many interpretations you could do about it. You can have the Batman that wants to be a playboy and have his life and get rid of all the criminals so that he could go live with Selena in some tropical island. But there's also the Batman that is just that. He's the Batman. and he has no choice to use the Bruce Wayne persona because that's what it is. It's a persona. And they drive that home too with the Martha storyline. I appreciate that because I think the Thomas Wayne as a bad guy thing, we saw it in the Joker, and we've seen little stories about that, even though we know that Thomas Wayne in other movies and other realities is the Batman himself. But I like that in this one, they call it out. We mentioned it about him just beating up, poor people. He has mental disorders. He has mental issues. He needs help because we see it that it's hereditary in his family. And they give you an explanation without ever having to get an explanation. It's not just that he saw the necklaces on Crime Alley or that he fell down a cave and he's scared of bats. This person actually has something clinically wrong with him. And they mention that in just little snippets. In a movie, plot points, but little snippets. They don't have to sit there and, again, all this exposition. Martha watched her parents do this, and Thomas Wayne tried to hide it while he was running for mayor. Oh, so wait, that means Bruce's mom was at a mental institution in Arkham? Interesting. And I think that, not even having to draw all this attention necessary to it, and it lays the foundation of who we're dealing with as a character.
Yeah. Like it's so layered, and just go back to like Pattinson's performance, like it was a collective effort, but like, you brought up just like how even keeled he was throughout the whole time. The one time like he finally does raise his voice is in Arkham, when, Riddler, kind of lays out like what the bigger plan was. But like throughout the whole time, he's even keeled, but then it's those nonverbal cues that you mentioned, like just little things that he would do with his eyes, especially in those conversations between him and Selena, or when he's like locked in on the little boy, in that opening scene in the bedroom. Like he just told so many stories with his eyes that, mind you, like the dialogue was great too, but like those nonverbals, like I was just beyond impressed with what Pattinson did. And I know, a lot of people, try to hate on him because of his,
Is that word? Yeah.
But like, if you had seen any of his recent work, whether it's Tenet or the thing he did with Holland on Netflix or Lighthouse, like the man been getting busy for a minute. And so between, his recent work and then knowing what Reeves did with the Planet of the Apes trilogy, like I was more than comfortable with whatever they were going to do together because I figured it was going to be in good hands.
We got to give a shout out to not only Matt Reeves, but the casting director. This was a cast that was fantastic. I mean, you have obviously Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, Paul Dano as the Riddler, and Colin Farrell as Penguin, Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner Gordon, and Andy Serkis as Alfred. I mean, that's a who's who. And it's casted so well because I think about it, like Anne Hathaway works for the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight Rises. Michael Caine works as the Alfred for the Christopher Nolan Batmans. But if you're looking at what the universe that Matt Reeves was building, the guy that gave you Cloverfield and Caesar from Planet of the Apes, this casting is brilliant. And I got to give a shout out to, I think Zoe Kravitz, I don't like the twist for her that she's actually the daughter, right? I think it would have been much more interesting of her just being a person that was trying to rob the mob and one of her friends gets killed. And that she's kind of like the Black Panther in Civil War where she's just a force. Yeah. And that she's constantly getting in the way of whatever situation Batman and Gordon are in. And
about her own vengeance,
It's a movie about vengeance. Exactly. Yeah. And I do think they had great chemistry together. I do think that they have a very fun dynamic that we haven't seen in most iterations of Batman and Catwoman, because when Michelle Pfeiffer played her, she a great Catwoman, but again, it's just a different feel to it. And I think Zoe found a way to bring the athleticism, the sexiness, the cunningness, and also the vulnerability to this character that all these other women, even back in the 60s, were able to lay down the foundation for her. So I think she did a great job. I would have done something a little bit different, but that's a minor nitpick for the entire film because I think she worked perfectly. I think Colin Farrell was an unsung hero in this movie. I think I'm chef's kiss to him. And from the little scenes in the club where, it's like, oh, that is the mayor, to the car chasing that we saw in the trailers, any little thing that he's in, he does such a great job of just soaking up your attention and the atmosphere. He does a great job in it. Paul Dano.
It's interesting to kind of look at Colin Farrell as having a resurgence, But like it had been quiet. I mean, at least for me, it had been quiet for Colin Farrell for a little bit.
Yeah, I think he had one of those Harry Potter movies, like post Harry Potter, the Fantastic Beasts series. But yeah, and then he had the one bad season of True Detective, right? Like there's this season 1 and season 3, and poor him and Vince Vaughn and Amy Adams just couldn't. Rachel McAdams just couldn't hit that home run. But this movie hit the home run, and Paul Dano. I mean, I love him in There Will Be Blood, but this movie, I think what impressed me the most is he had the really tough job of obviously not doing what Jim Carrey did, because it's easy to fall into that trap, because that trap is trying to do what Heath Ledger did. This movie, this character could have been Joker light, Heath Ledger light. And they found the way to make it much more like a Unabomber, to make it much more like the Zodiac, to make it much more like, oh, this is not the Joker. The Joker is chaos. No matter what movie he is, that's just chaos. That is the total opposite of what Batman is. Paul Dano played this as somebody who thought he was working with Batman. And that was the brilliance of it. The brilliance of it is finding the bad guy who thinks they're right. Why was Heath Ledger such a great Joker? Not just because of the performance, because Christopher Nolan had him as, you could believe what he was saying. You could kind of get like, yeah, society is just a bunch of cannibals. And in this movie, when you're hearing Paul Dano just talk about the corruption and the lying and what we've lived with, not just everybody's going to talk about the elections over the last few elections, but any election in history. Anytime a politician or somebody with wealth or somebody that's trying to be an influencer gives you these promises, Paul Dano found the way to hit that nerve that we see, or that we are able to think. Paul Dano was able to portray what all of us think that type of person is that we see on the internet.
Oh, absolutely. The charismatic bully or whatever. I mean, and that's what's so compelling about, those characters, is that they have those, I guess they call it like the dark triad personality, where there's like a bit of narcissism along with like psychopathy and Machiavellianism. And so like you get those 3 recipes and like you can create a compelling character. And you even see it not in just these Batman films, but you do see it with some of these influencers who spew the kind of rhetoric that they spew that can lead to people, storming the Capitol over a year and a half ago, and like that kind of influence, is what was on display with the Riddler's character, where, it was funny because, in the movie they talk about how, he only has 500 followers, but that's enough to get people like storm the freaking, center and try to take out the mayor, like that kind of power and influence and the belief that you're right, and speaking from a place where, if you are articulate enough, you can shift a few minds. And so like, props to Dano, man, because like you said, because of the kind of film that the Batman is, I don't think there would have been a place for a Jim Carrey Riddler.
Yeah.
Like it worked for a Joel Schumacher type film. I even think it would have worked in a Burton film. Mm-hmm. But like the direction that Dano went with it, where, it's like, it was like a Joker meets Bane, kind of, marriage there, and then threw it in a NutriBullet, and like just the horror elements to his character, like starting off, like you were getting everything in this film, like you were getting like that horror element. It was very Strangers-esque, which is one of my favorite horror films, like to start it off. You get your like romantic element of it, and then, you still have like that detective thriller element. Like it really was a excellent film just all together. And like you said, it was a collective effort. So whether it was Pattinson, Kravitz, Wright, Turturro, Serkis, Farrell, Dano, like everyone just brought it, man. And like it's been over a week and I'm still just processing it all because like there's just this, however long we're doing it still wouldn't even be enough to just dissect it.
And, you know, we talk about the characters and the directing. I think two things that I want to hit on is the composer, Michael Giacchino. I
Yes.
mean, the music in this, for using Nirvana, using Ave Maria, and the Batman theme itself. I mean, it is top notch, and it hits so well in the theater. It strikes. It puts a vivid feeling and emotion when it's hitting on the screen, and it's with its companion. And when it's not just the music and the great acting, but the imagery in this movie, from the cinematography to what Matt Reeves pictured on his board. There are so many moments when you're watching this movie, you're like, I know that I probably have seen that imagery of Batman before, but this is the best. I've seen them do this thing, or I've seen them do that thing. And this is, I tweeted this out. This is a movie that's comfortably familiar, but also super unique. And I feel like we've lived here before, that we've seen some of this, but it's a whole new experience. And it's a whole new point of view that this movie does. And I think it's all encompassing. It's when you're watching all the red in the movie, or you're watching the noir type of feel of it, or you're watching the gun fire going back and forth and Batman in the shadows and the use of shadows in this movie. You constantly looking around the shadows, whether it's Paul Dano in the beginning of the movie or when Batman's not even in the scene, he's just narrating and they just film it. You're like, I know that's just a black composite screen that they use as CGI, but is that a little Batman figure I see? It's the brilliance in that. Again, this movie's long. There's no movie's perfect. This movie is long. They could have shaved some stuff out of it.
It was a smooth 3 hours though.
I actually think it's and I actually think it's a smoother 3 hours the second time around because you're able to appreciate more of like, you're not necessarily lost in the moment anymore. Now you're actually able to kind of watch it and look out for different things. And because when you're watching it the first time, they do a great, again, this is a Batman movie. You know he's going to survive. But other than Robert Pattinson being in the sequel and maybe Andy Serkis, you weren't sure about anything else in this movie. There were no other guarantees in this movie.
Maybe Gordon.
Yeah, because we hadn't hear him say Commissioner Gordon. But like, you didn't know where this movie was going to take you. So I think in that, it was an enthralling 3 hours. And, but with that, I could see people's complaints of it being a little long. But I think with its length in film, it's able to marinate in certain moments. Like that, again, the opening scene with the mayor, having to just kind of wait there. What's he seeing? What's the news telling us? It's not about the story, and it's not even about what the mayor's talking about. It's just about his obliviousness that nobody can ever get me. But this entire time, I've been hunted. And the way Matt Reeves with the sound and the rain and the way Paul Dano attacks him and the way it's so visceral and the costuming. Like there's moments like that when Zoe Kravitz is doing the recon and we get the best technology of Batman that I've seen in a long time. It's a little eye thing because again, it seems kind of like far-fetched and a little sci-fi, but just real enough. You're like, okay, yeah, like that's kind of cool. They don't overdo it. They don't overdo the technology, but they also make it important. Like it's part, again, he's growing into it. And this is the character. And I think it's little details like that that really just impressed me with this movie. Before we get into the future of this franchise, any flaws, anything that maybe you think they could have worked on or you might have changed, even though this, at the very least, is a top 3 Batman movie, what did you think about anything you might have a little nitpick with?
I'll be honest, I don't think I'm in a position to try to tell the filmmakers what they should have done. Like it was so good, it would feel selfish of me to try to tell them what they should have done differently from a film that's just damn near perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could do it now before we get into the future of this franchise. I think this is the best Batman movie. I think it comes down to three things. Michael Keaton and Jack made Batman cool again. Christopher Nolan, Christian Bale, and Heath Ledger made Batman legit. This is the best Batman story. This is the best ensemble cast in a Batman movie. It's the best music, and that's saying a lot. Shout out to Hans Zimmer and to yeah. Okay, I take it back. Prince is the best of all of them. But yeah, I take that back. All right. Yeah, Prince. But with that, that's how high of a bar this is. Right? And I think that this movie does that. So I would put it The Batman 1, Dark Knight 2, and Batman 89 3. And then make your own list after that. What do you think?
I have no qualms with that list at all.
Shout out to Batman Begins. I think Batman Begins is severely underrated. I think Batman Begins doesn't get the love it deserves. Batman Begins can argue is better than The Dark Knight as a Batman movie. Pure Batman movie. Might be better than The Dark Knight.
I mean, it would be 4 on that list if we were to go like a top 5.
Yeah, and then Batman Returns is 5.
Yes.
There we go. All right, we did it. That's why we're here on the Two Nerds of a Feather podcast. It's Everitt, Neil, and myself, Mike Mercado. We are loving being able to dissect this film. Hopefully, you guys got a chance to watch it in its second week out. But before we get out of here, I want to put my Robert Pattinson here. Hold on. There you go.
He does something with that in the future.
My mom, throughout the entire movie, was just like, I just want to cut his hair. I just want to cut it so bad. But
I guess that's the story, right? This. Like he just doesn't give a shit.
No, I do love when he has the just the grease and then just the hair right there. But even when it's the middle of the day, it's not like he's combing it. But it's also Robert Pattinson, and he's extremely, extremely good looking. So What do you think the future of this franchise is? I do think that obviously we saw the post-credit scene. I actually don't like the post-credit scene. I think that's probably my least favorite part of the movie. I thought it was definitely, and post-credit scene, I mean the Joker. I think that was like the most tacked on thing ever. I don't need the Joker right now. I know you can't have Batman, Gotham, Gordon, Alfred without him, but I really just want to do something again simple. And to me, the future of this movie isn't in the Joker for part 2. The future for part 2 is in Arkham. And I think the main bad guy in that movie needs to be Mr. Freeze.
Yeah, and I've been hearing, I mean, that's what's been talked about for a while now is Mr. Freeze and like a grounded version of Mr. Freeze. And I would be interested to see what that looks like. The future of Batman, truthfully, I don't see it being the Joker. Like, I think like that Joker cameo was maybe a precursor to the series, for HBO Max.
Interesting.
Like in regards to the future of the film, like I would love to see Freeze, or I think people were talking about the Court of Owls.
That's one that I think would be a great series. I think Matt Reeves can make it into a movie, but can you imagine like an 8-part Peacemaker type of thing with Batman within that Court of Owls?
Yeah. What I would also like to see is Dick Grayson or like some kind of variation, because look. Batman was whooping behind for most of that film, but when the time came, towards that final act, he was getting whooped on.
No, he almost got. It's the one thing I love Godzilla versus King Kong. I love that movie. But it's one of the things that I love the most is when they made Godzilla vulnerable. Mechagodzilla has its mouth open, and if it wasn't for the fact that Kong was not there, that Kong was there, Godzilla would have died. And I love that tension that Matt Reeves has of what would be the second Riddler or the third Riddler or the 50th Riddler because of the army that he made, just slowly popping open the shotgun, grabbing a shell, doing it slowly, and again, slowly putting down there, because if Catwoman doesn't show up, he's dead right there. And I think that there's a realism to that.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if we'll see Selena again in the second one. I'm sure maybe, but like we know he can't do it alone.
Yeah. It's gonna be fun. I think it's gonna be fun. My hoping idea, the thing that my nerd brain keeps going to is, I think it's a night in Arkham, and a serial killer known as Mr. Freeze, dubbed as Mr. Freeze by the media, has the entire compound locked down. And the end of that movie is when you get the true tease of the Joker was the one who actually orchestrated the entire escape. And now he's going to bring chaos down with the entire Arkham army into Gotham for part 3. I think I'm almost following the Planet of the Apes storyline. I think like you could almost follow it that way, that eventually we're going to have a war in the city of Gotham. And I just hope it's better than Dark Knight Rises war.
Same. I trust Reeves because Planet of the Apes was perfect. You know, I know people might want to dunk on James Franco, but, you know, for the starter film, which I thought it was great, you know, and like, even with that story, it's like you get baby Caesar, you know, like you're still getting like that origin story. Like you're getting a young Caesar and you got like young Bruce, you know, in the Batman. And so like, you know, like Reeves is going to be telling a longer story. What I'll be interested in seeing is like, who do they get for Freeze if that's who they roll with? You know, do we get a Harvey Dent as well?
You know, it's funny you say that. I think, and this is a good one for us to kind of go out on, and because we could get all the peoples to talk about this. I'm interested to see, we've seen them do it with the Riddler now, and we've seen them do it before with a bunch of different characters. Let's say we assume Joker will be in one of these movies eventually, because they've already said, I think the casting is, if you've seen the Eternals, the one that has the power to control all the minds of like villagers and whatnot, he's supposed to be cast as the Joker. It's the
I believe that was him in the movie, right?
I was looking for credits. I didn't see him in the credits.
Yeah, I don't think he was credited.
Okay, so that's something to keep an eye on. Do you, and this is for everybody, and I'm going to throw it to you, the casting and story writing of what do you want to see them do, redemption of characters, or do you want them to go somewhere completely different? And I say that we saw them do, I thought Jim Carrey was fine for the movie he was in, but they gave redemption that there's a new version of the Riddler. Do you think that they're going to go in that direction with like a Mr. Freeze? We seen him do it with the Penguin in this movie. We saw him do it with the Riddler in this movie. I think Catwoman's always been portrayed pretty damn well. And we've seen now that Pattinson, like a lot of us believe, is going to be a good Batman moving forward. Matt Reeves, a great director. This music was great. Knowing all that, do you want to see them go in new directions with new and awesome rogues gallery? Or do you want to see the redemption of certain characters? It's tough, right?
I mean, like define redemption.
So know? I love Arnie as Mr. Freeze, but do you want a Mr. Freeze that can go down as not a comical character in your IP?
What killed the dinosaurs?
The Ice Age. Stop it. Don't, we're not doing this. We're not doing this, okay? We are not quoting Batman and Rock. We are not doing this.
I don't want a redeeming Mr. Freeze. Like, I want this Mr. Freeze to be like a cold-blooded killer. Pun intended.
Gotham kind of did that the series, so I'd be interested to see if like what they would be willing to do. But if you could take that story from the Batman the Animated Series and try to somewhat, like there's this guy just causing mayhem in Gotham, and at the end it's because he's trying to save his sick wife. Yeah. How is Batman supposed to fight that?
True that.
Like, to me, that's its own.
Speaking of Batman the Animated Series, there's two villains who I'd really love to see.
Clayface?
No.
Okay.
Although I would like to see Clayface, but I don't know how that would work out.
Yeah. Clayface would be fun, though. Maybe not in this universe, but Clayface would be fun.
There's two villains, and both of them were kind of one-offs in the animated series. One of them was was he a one-off? Temple Fugit. The one who was like late for an interview and lost everything, and like everything was always related to time with him.
Ooh, okay.
And then
I don't remember that one.
And then the guy who like had the child slaves in the sewers.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Ooh, that's dark. That'd be perfect. That'd be perfect. Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways you could go. I think they're going to stay away from the mythical stuff. I think you're not going to see like, Raj Al Ghul. I don't think you'll see that. I think the Court of Owls is in play. I just think it depends on what you do with Bruce, because that's so much more of a interesting Bruce story where it's like, all right, Bruce would have to mingle with all these people, but also Batman would have to come to the realization that this was happening under his eyes the entire time, under his nose. He was never in control. And I think that in its own is pretty fun. But Everett, I think in general, as I get my Robert Pattinson hair out of the way.
Well, see, now I'm sorry, because now my mind is going and I want to write a letter to Matt Reeves like, hey, watch that one episode of Batman the Animated Series with the guy with the child slaves in the sewer. I think his name was the Rat King or something like that.
No, I think that's Ninja Turtles.
No, his name was something though.
Yeah, look it up. Why don't you look it up? Because if we're going to go down the rogues gallery, and there are so many, again, I don't think they'll be going down the Raj Al Ghul. As much as I loved what Christopher Nolan did with Cillian Murphy as Scarecrow, seeing what maybe Matt Reeves can do with the Scarecrow would be really interesting. I'd be also fascinated to see him do something with the Mad Hatter. I think that would be fun, like its own. Again, where you have to be careful is if you're going to be grounded in reality, you just don't want them all to just be the very stereotypical serial killer, right? Like, you got to be careful that they're not just all CSI Miami bad guy of the week.
All right. His name was the Sewer King.
Sewer King. Okay.
And he lived in the sewers, and he had an army of runaway children that he would send out on the streets to do robberies and stuff.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be good.
And then Batman caught one of the kids, and the kid was a mute, and he was helping Batman, try to free all the other children. And then Sewer King had these pet crocodiles as well.
What about for a more realistic one, Victor Zsasz?
I don't remember him.
He's the one that after he kills one of his victims, he slices himself.
Ooh.
To as a number. How about Scarface?
It's another one.
Calendar Man?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I do kind of want to see the Clock King though. Temple
right.
Fugit.
There is one. That'd be fun. There is one. Okay. I do have the one. Hugo Strange.
Wait, isn't his name Doctor Strange?
I mean, I don't think you could say that in these movies, but it's Dr. Hugo Strange.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. But you can't.
You gotta put Hugo in so that we don't.
Yeah, you can't say Doctor Strange and not in a major motion picture 2022 movie forward. Not anymore. No. That mouse will be coming after that bat so fast.
Dr. Hugo Strange.
I think that would be great. Have you ever played the Arkham games?
I have not played the Arkham games. I know there's another one coming out, right?
Yeah, there's two. There's one that split off that's supposed to be the Suicide Squad killed the Justice League, and there's one where it's Gotham Knights, but they're not connected, but they are connected. Video game guys, please explain it to us. But Bodie, we've done it. We've talked about the Batman. We talked about how much we've enjoyed watching this film, where it ranks amongst other. It's made a boatload of money. The fans love it. The critics love it. Great acting, great directing, great music, a great time. And it's been fun to kind of see the resurgence of this character, and people are talking about it in the water cooler. And moving forward, we'll see what this DC universe does. It's not connected to anything, as we could see, which is good. I'm glad Batman is going to have its own respect, its own universe, because at least this Batman can kind of hold its own, and you could do so many unique things with it. But we'll see with them moving. Yeah, we'll see with them moving everything into next year. Well, yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens if the Flash ever actually decides to come out, what they're going to do with that. But Bodie, any final thoughts as we wrap up this conversation on Vengeance?
Well, yeah, I do have some final thoughts just to piggyback off of what you were just saying. DC really does find a way to just F things up. You got such a hot movie right now in the Batman, and what do a week later? You push back your next 3 films.
Everything. They push back everything.
You just crush it in the box office, and then you just follow up by giving us a nothing burger. All right. The Batman's been crushing it. Freaking Peacemaker crushed it on freaking HBO Max. You all are hot right now. And what do you decide to do? You push back your films.
Well, we'll see if that's because Discovery buying Time Warner has something to do with that. And Discovery might be like, listen. No, you guys are going to wait. How much did the Batman make? Yeah, you're going to wait so we could get our hands on those other films. But if you want to wait, you can at least go see a Batman. For me, will be a third time when I finally get a chance to see that. Bodie, it's been a lot of fun talking about this movie.
It's making its way to streaming next month, right?
Yeah, in the middle of April, 45 days from release. So if you haven't got a chance to go see it in the theaters, watch it. It's a great in the big screen, and that sound is amazing. You got to listen to Ave Maria and Nirvana as they did it in composing that movie because it is great. I've been walking around like that Jordan gif, just listening to Ave Maria. So don't even get me started how great this movie, it just lives in your head. Bum, 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 bum. Like it is.
Like, it's such a simple score.
Mm-hmm.
And it's effective.
Mm-hmm.
And then the little mid part of it, like when, that's when it really taps into your feels, like when he's pulling up, to the funeral.
Yep.
And that somber.
And then Kurt Cobain all of a sudden will pop in and be like, underneath the bridge. You're like, this is just fantastic. I could do this all day.
Like music just does so much,
especially in this film.
The right sound can just put you in such a different place. And like, kudos to the music supervisor for knowing the proper placement to put that music. All right. Like, I hope they just keep that theme for all of it. Like even Nolan had like that signature Batman theme,
which was my ringtone for about 3 years.
Yeah. Like, I hope bum, ba, bum, bum doesn't go anywhere. That's what I'm going to just call it from here on out.
Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, I mean, again, think about it. Like, just some greats from Danny Elfman to, I mean, come on. Danny Elfman all the way to Hans Zimmer to Michael Giacchini. I'll figure out before we leave. I'll make sure I pronounce it correctly.
I think it's like Michael Giacchino or something.
Yeah, like Michael Giacchino. So, I mean, shout out to them. I mean, shout out to everybody. And shout out to each and every one of you for joining us on this edition of the Two Nerds of a Feather podcast with the one and only Bodie Everitt O'Neill. Everett, where can people find you? The people find you on the radio waves.
On the radio waves, you can find me on 102.3 XLC. In the most recent ratings, we are now 28th. In the top 30. So we are on the climb, not too bad for a small station. You can follow me on the IG at Bodie World Peace. All right. If you like me enough, or if I like you enough and you want to get to know me personally, you can find me on Facebook. You can add me, Everitt O'Neill. Although, like, I don't really post much because my grandmother's on there, and so I kind of watch my work. But other than that, you can find me on here with my brother, shooting the breeze, whether it's about Batman or sports or mental health. We do it all. And you just remember, even during this whole discussion that we've had about the Batman, and even when it comes to our rankings are our rankings. And if you have any kind of hangups about it, you just remember that Justin Fields is still the quarterback of the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, we will. And what do we say? Because Justin Fields is our quarterback,
that you are not going to just talk to us any kind of way.
He's Everitt O'Neill. I'm Matt Mercado. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this edition of the Two Nerds of a Feather podcast.